At President Trump's direction, we're going to continue to fully partner with governors around the country and health officials in increasing and scaling the amount of testing. And we have every confidence that we can have a sufficient amount of testing to be able to reopen America.
That's Vice President Mike Pence from yesterday on the administration's efforts to rapidly expand coronavirus testing. Earlier today, the Vice President held a teleconference with our nation's governors as the two sides were clashing over whether there's enough testing to restart the economy. President Trump has said we have enough testing, more testing than anywhere in the world, I should say, and on Sunday announced he would in fact invoke the Defense Production Act to increase the supply of testing swabs. The governors from both political parties are arguing it's the federal government's job to do much more. Watch that.
For the national level to say that we have what we need and really to have no guidance to the state levels is just irresponsible because we're not there yet.
To try to push this off to say that the governors have plenty of testing and they should just get to work on testing, somehow we aren't doing our job, is just absolutely false.
And here's the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on the president.
It has to be testing, it has to be tracing, contact tracing, it has to be treatment, and it has to be quarantine. It's part of something bigger as well to be done properly. But we're way late on it, and that is the failure. The president gets an F, a failure on the testing.
I want to bring in Bret Baier, anchor and executive editor of Special Report. Bret, always great to see you. Last hour, Jason Chaffetz, former chairman of the Oversight Committee, was on with us on Outnumbered, and he brought up a good point. Where is Congress, and why are some of them not coming back until like fully at the end of the first week of May? Do we know?
They're home, and they are not scheduled to be back, and they may have a unanimous consent vote on this increase of the PPP program, the small business funding, but as of now, they are not back. And whether that is a safety reason, whether that is they're back home with their families, it's not being said, but they're not scheduled to be back until the first week in May.
And you can probably guess why I start with that question, because if it is needed for things to happen in the government for some of these governors, I see you smiling, it might be helpful since they say they have to vote, I would imagine, in person. I don't know how that's going to look, but if all of that has to lay out, how are we going to get more testing? How are we going to move the ball on this?
The testing issue is a really big issue, and it's an issue that has, from the start, been screwed up by the CDC. They concede that there was a failure in the initial launch of tests, and they had to restart, and it really cost several weeks. The evolution of how the president has talked about it has been full. I mean, remember the Rose Garden where he had all those businesses where he was saying that there were going to be tests in parking lots of CVS's around the country, and the screening that you were going to do on Google and all of that was a big rollout, and it looked very impressive. But in the end, now the president is saying it's up to the governors to do the testing. So there has been an evolution on testing. Now, I think that the fact that you have Dr. Birx and Dr. Redfield and Dr. Fauci backing up this rollout, saying that they have enough tests in these states to do at least phase one, the experts are signing on. But the testing issue is still a real big issue as companies get their heads around how to plus up all of these tests in the millions.
Right. Well, and the cry for more swabs, for instance, something that the president just put into motion through the Defensive Production Act, the cry for the swabs have been shout level here on the East Coast for 2 months. Like we have known that the supply kits with the tests were low grade in terms of what they offered for weeks and weeks. And I guess why I pick on Congress with this, Bret, just so you know, if the governors and the president are left to kind of work all this out, and we're still missing the tests that we need, according to experts, according to doctors, then doesn't that mean that the Congress people and the senators get involved in this somehow? I don't know, maybe I'm too Pollyannish about it, but I thought it was all hands on deck.
Right, and that's a fair point, and one that was not posed to Speaker Pelosi this weekend in her various interviews. One thing on the test, though, I mean, there's two different kinds. There's the COVID test, where you test positive or negative, right? And they're getting closer and closer to making it quick. But let's say you test on a Monday, and then you go to the supermarket on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, is the test on Monday still good? Maybe not. Maybe you touched a pear that had COVID on it. You know, so the antibody test is really the test that I think eventually everybody's going to go to say, do I have the immunity to be able to feel comfortable going back to work?
Yeah, and how do you get that? You know, is it the telehealth line that you call? Is it your doctor? It's hard enough to get the first test. All right, we could go round and round about this. I want to get your quick take on this large protest that's playing out right now in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but there are others that are scheduled for today as well, about stay-at-home orders and them wanting to press freedom for the right to go back to work, so on and so forth. Your take, Brett.
Well, I think the conversation that you had with Governor Huckabee was really, really right on. A lot of these places are protests about specific things that they can or cannot do, and that maybe it's not being explained to them. Others are making a stand that they want to open up their economy. I mean, remember that there's so many people out of work. That said, these images are not the best images because they don't send the signal of, you know, doing what you're supposed to do, which is social distance. You can open up a state that doesn't have a lot of COVID cases, but still wash hands, social distance, and do it in a way that doesn't flick the switch on and off, but do it in a nuanced kind of way. This is not nuance here, and people are making their feelings clear.
Bret Baier, thank you so very much. 6 p.m. Eastern for a special report with you. See you then.
We hope.
He'll be there. Meanwhile, have you seen Joe Biden? How the likely Democratic nominee could be fading as President Trump dominates the airwaves and social media. Power Panel slides in next. Plus, the worst mass shooting in Canada's history after a gunman disguised as a police officer went on a deadly 12-hour rampage. What we are now learning about why he did this.
My hearts go out to everyone affected in what is a terrible situation. I want to thank the police for their hard work and people for cooperating with authorities.
Most of others, Costco, where they are testing workers and also providing everything they can for those workers, from face masks to gloves, you name it. This is a big trend right now, and Ashley Webster's been following it. So Ashley, to Ken Langone's point earlier, we will get back to business, but it will not be business as usual, will it?
No, it won't, at least certainly in the short and medium term, Neil. We're seeing a lot more companies now look at what they call thermal camera testing. GM, Tyson Foods, Intel, using these machines that measure elevated body temperature, EBT. You see them being used in airports and train terminals, even at concerts. And it's now reported that Amazon is getting into this big time. They've set up hardware for cameras in at least 6 warehouses. So the question is, what's so great about these things? Well, the cameras can speed up testing of workers. They measure how much heat people emit relative to their surroundings. So if you're feeling, not so great and you have a fever, these cameras will pick it up. Now, anyone flagged by a camera will be given a second test through those forehead temperatures as a second measure to see if indeed you do have some sort of fever. We also reached out, by the way, to Smithfield. This is the company that's been forced to shut down a number of its meat processing plants in recent days and weeks because of a virus outbreak. And they told us, in part, they say, we have implemented thermal scanning technology in all facilities, including distribution centers. We are using 3 types of thermal scanning technology based on the size of the facility. So we're seeing this more and more. But of course, this also comes in addition, Neil, to increased safety measures as always, keeping that physical distance, wearing the face mask, making the gloves available, readily available hand sanitizer, all of this part of getting back to work. But these thermal cameras are said to be faster, quicker, and in some cases, some claim they are even more accurate than those forehead thermometers. So there you have it. It's I guess it's going to be the new normal as this technology starts to get picked up more and more. In fact, we reached out to some of the automakers, and Ford told us they're already using thermal cameras at all the locations that are still open. So get used to it. It's going to be here for a while.
All right, Ashley Webster, thank you very, very much. I want to follow up with the Wall Street Journal's Jillian Melcher. Jillian, you know, for Ashley's argument, it's going to be a very different and changed world. I want to get into a number of items, but first and foremost, with what is happening on this getting back to work notion. Apparently, the oil markets are one thing, and now as we slide to $2.66 a barrel, part of it is expiration of contract, I get that. But do you think any of this is a reflection on the comeback could take a while, that this world slowdown, stop down, as some might say, isn't a short-lived event. It's going to linger a while. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's most likely going to be the case. I mean, we were hoping to see more of a V-shaped recovery. It's looking like this is going to be a U-shaped recovery, that it's going to be something that takes a long time. And I'm worried particularly for some of the small businesses that have been shut down, that aren't doing the business, whether they're going to be able to come back at all. So yeah, it's dark economic picture, I think.
You know, again, looking at a contract, an oil event, I mean, when other data, of course, has been very, very weak, we expected that. You know, more states are coming back today. Germany entered back with, you know, easing up on some of its sheltering provisions, not in one fell swoop here. They're going to be careful about it. Ditto, we've seen the same in China, much of Asia. But I'm just wondering how long this unwinding process takes, and especially when you hear out of 6 out of 10 Americans who are concerned, even now we're rushing it. What do you make of that?
Boy, I wish I had the answer to how long this is going to last. I don't. I think that there's still so much that we don't know about coronavirus, from really basic facts to whether you become immune, how long that immunity lasts, what the actual mortality rate is. There's just a lot that we don't know about that, and it's making it really difficult for politicians to make decisions, but I think also for businesses to make decisions about what they should order, about what life getting back to work will look like. It's just dealing with a lot of unknowns right now, and I think the only one certain thing is that the workplace that we return to is not going to resemble the workplace that we left.
Yeah, if you think about it, in so many buildings, you know, the people are crowded together, and they're certainly not 6 feet apart. And maybe they make allowances of that and make it 3 feet apart. But even there, buildings such as our own, that would be a tough one to adhere to. The reason why I mention it is the CDC is reporting its count of about 646,625 cases of new coronavirus cases as of now, versus the previous day, 720,630 cases. So an uptick in cases. Now that is something you don't want to see. You want to see if there are new cases, they're declining, or the rate of increase is declining, or hopefully in the case of hospitalizations, outright declining. So this would seem to indicate we're not out of the woods yet, or can contemplate even drifting out of the woods, huh?
Yeah, and there's a real possibility that as we ease up on some of these rules, start returning people to work, that you're going to see cases go up. So it's possible that this isn't going to look like a single peak. It's going to look like a couple of them clustered together. But again, I'll just say, I think it's really concerning right now that we don't have widespread testing. We don't have good statistics on a lot of these things. And it's so important for the data to be driving our decision making. So I'd really focus on getting some better data. Randomized testing would probably be helpful. We're seeing that study out of Stanford showing us all kinds of things that we didn't know before. But until we have a little bit more knowledge, I think it's difficult to make any predictions.
Jillian, thank you very, very much. I know we were scheduled to talk about some other developments, but this news and these latest developments, not only on the energy front, but on the latest CDC figures, warrant maybe going in that direction. I want to show you what you're seeing in the lower right portion of your screen. You might look at that smaller number up top, $2.39, as the decline today, and the bottom number is the actual price of oil. It's actually the reverse. The decline is close to 60 bucks a barrel. The cost of that barrel is $2.39. It is the biggest plunge we've seen in history. And at these levels, the lowest close in oil, if it were to hold, going back to 1983, when Ronald Reagan was president, 2 years into his administration. And what you might recall from that period, I'm old enough to remember it, is that collapse in prices after prices were so high. Remember the late 70s when we had a second oil crisis and all? Well, this was reverberated the other way around, where a lot of Texas wildcatters and others went out of business because the price had collapsed so low that it was not worth the staying in business or even affording to stay in business. That is the concern right now on the oil front, that a lot of these players, leaving aside some of the big boys like ExxonMobil and Chevron, two principal energy components within the Dow. I'm talking about the energy players like Schlumberger and Marathon Oil and Noble Energy and Conoco and Halliburton and Phillips. I'm talking about Apache and Diamondback. I'm talking as well about Valero Energy. I'm talking about at least 7 ETFs and mutual funds directly pegged to the oil industry and to even foreign oil, British Petroleum, for example, and British prices like Brent, North Sea crude, also getting hit hard, but nothing like this. That is something that is very, very unusual and has walloped the entire sector of the market. But oil is so cheap, they really don't know what to do with it. Some have talked about beefing up our strategic petroleum reserve, but where do you put it when we've tapped that puppy out? But it is an unusual dilemma for Americans who would normally welcome the low gas prices that will no doubt come with this, for how long is anyone's guess. But it is a reminder how sometimes you get what you wish for and then some. And now look at that, $1.85 a barrel. Karl Rove on these fast-moving historical developments. I mean, we're getting very darn close at this point, a little over $1 a barrel, Karl. Normally, I'm tapping your brain about political insight, but you're a good read of market history and Texas history and oil and how it hit that state, back in the early 80s. We're revisiting that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, Permian Basin has been in trouble for much of the year already and a lot of last year as well. And this can't help at all. We're going to see a lot of small producers, independents go out of business. A lot of their vendors are going to be in difficulty. Now, of course, this is exaggerated. As you say, we got two issues here. We got the close of the monthly contracts, and then we also have storage problems, as well as the overlooming problem of demand. And some of this will go away when the May contracts kick in, and some of it will go away with the recovery as it starts to ramp up and people get in their cars again. But there's a fundamental problem of lots of production in the world and prices down as a result.
I'm wondering, and you're right, I mean, forward-looking contracts, I know we're getting a little wonky here, but they are much higher, although they've come down too, not as startling as this. I'm wondering if this all feeds a narrative, though, that somehow that we'll come out of this and the whole virus situation and getting back to work. I don't know how states, I know Texas has been slowly inching back in that regard and plans to do so this week even more. We know what Germany's doing. We know what another dozen states besides Texas are doing. So I have no doubt we'll get back on that. But I'm wondering if this calls into question the V-shaped recovery that a lot of people, including the president, want to see, that it could be a little different than that. It could take a little longer than that. What do you think?
Well, cheap oil prices will help the rest of the economy. It won't help oil-producing states like Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, for example. And our drillers can't make money at $22 or $25 a barrel. They got to be $30 or $40 a barrel before they can begin making money. So even these future contracts are not going to be particularly attractive. And as a result, states like Texas, which depend upon the oil economy to help generate revenues, are going to find themselves in a pickle next year. Every state's going to be in a pickle when it comes to revenues. but the oil producing states are going to be in even more greater difficulty given the low energy prices and the impact on their budgets. But outside of Texas, it may help. It may help in big industrial states. It may help in other parts of the country where energy production is not so critical part of the economy. Florida, for example, another big mega state in the southeast, may see its economy recover faster than Texas because they benefit from low oil prices, whereas the Texas economy doesn't.
You know, you're a great business guest too, Carl, so hats off to you here. I'm just wondering, Saudi Arabia and Russia had this quasi-agreement to lead a 20 million barrel a day cut in oil production. We know now, with oil now just around $1 a barrel, incredible as it seems, that they would have to cut a lot more than that to stem this tide, wouldn't they?
They would. Now, look, let's be honest. The Saudis and the Russians don't necessarily have the interests of the United States at heart. The fracking revolution has made us largely independent. It has depressed world prices for energy. It's made us a very competitive and important player on the international market. This is particularly damaging to Russia. They got into this spat because OPEC is rusty and not able to enforce its agreements. But one side benefit to both of them, particularly to Russia, was to diminish the power of the American fracking revolution and hope that they collapse a lot of firms and they can't come back robustly. I think that's unlikely to happen. I think the destruction of firms is going to provide resources for more nimble, better capitalized firms to move in. But let's realize when the Russians and the Germans, actually the Russians and the Saudis got in this battle, it was not for the advantage of the United States. It was primarily for their own disagreements, but both of them saw a side benefit, the Russians more than the Saudis, to doing damage to the U.S. energy industry at the same time.
And look who's damaged now. Very good point, Carl. Thank you so much, my friend. Very much appreciated. Karl Rove here. As Carl pointed out, I think it bears repeating here. This is something that seems to be fairly localized to the May energy contract, which expires tomorrow. For example, the next contract, the most active contract, that's where you have the most activity, is in the June contract. And that, though down, is still at around $22 a barrel. So this is a bit of an anomaly, but even there, the June contract and in forward contracts going into the fall, they have all fallen on average, and this is an exact 10 to 12% from levels on Friday. But again, nothing like what's happening here at the now soon to be expired May contract. Again, that puppy's put to bed tomorrow. Do we have Mr. Flynn with us? Is he still with us?
Hey, Neil, I'm here.
Can you hear me, my friend?
Yes, I can.
Good. I didn't know if you were. I apologize for that. What do you make of those contracts outside of this one expiring tomorrow? Much higher, although they too are dropping, but nothing like the 91, 92% we're seeing on this one. What do you explain that to me?
Well, I think what's happening is there's no time for optimism in the next 24 hours. And in fact, that you can look that month down the road and say things will get better, OPEC cuts will start coming into play, but that isn't going to help you 24 hours from now. What's even more disturbing, if you're in this May contract, Neil, is the CME Group just issued a statement that said they will allow the May contract to trade negative. That is right. This futures contract could trade below zero if this sell-off continues. So don't think there's a bottom at zero, Neil. We could go negative $1, and that's a perfect example of what happens when you have a lot of oil and no place to put it.
How does that happen, though? How do you close on a contract that can trade negative? I've heard of negative interest rates, my friend, but haven't heard of negative oil prices. But explain how that goes.
Well, basically what's going to happen is that somebody, you're going to pay somebody to take that oil off your hands. So if you buy the prices at a negative price, you're going to get this oil and they're going to give you money to take it as a possibility. So if prices do indeed go negative, there may be people that will actually get oil and they'll get paid to take it off their hands. Now, it hasn't happened yet. But the way this market is free falling right now, and the fact that it has 24 hours to go, it's entirely possible that we could see, for the first time in history, see the crude oil prices trade negative. Now, we have had in history other markets, we read about, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, like the onion contract or the potato contract that traded below zero, but nothing like this in recent memory. To see something like this happen in the West Texas Intermediate contract, which has been for many, many generations, the bellwether of global oil prices, to close negative really shows you the state of this market, at least in this snapshot in time.
Phil, you were among the first to say whatever promises some OPEC members and the OPEC Plus members were making to cut production, that no matter what they were kicking around, the 20 million barrel a day figure comes to mind, it wouldn't be enough to address what is even a bigger sin in demand. And I'm wondering what would be if they had to frantically reorganize, get on the phone with them and have a virtual conference in this coronavirus age, what would they contemplate?
I think right now they would have to say, Saudi Arabia for the last couple of weeks that have been sending the most oil to our shores than they have for the last year, to say they're going to cut it off right now, because this definitely seems to be a U.S. storage issue at this time. That would be about the only thing, and to pledge more production cuts. But what you're really going to have to see, Neil, is the global economy start to come back. And I think that's going to happen. But make no mistake about it, what you're seeing on the screen today, this is going to impact us not today, not tomorrow, but for generations to come. Decisions that are going to be made because of this price crash about investment in oil going out 5 years, 10 years in the future, it's going to come back to bite us. We've been through this before, price crashes, in the short run, it's like, hey, great, we have low prices, but down the road, maybe 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, it'll lead to a price spike, because you're going to see so much investment pull back from an industry that's probably going to need it when the economy comes back.
You know what's so weird about it, Phil, if you think about it, is we look at these prices, I go, now we're soaring, my friend, we're up to $2.30 a barrel. That, if you think about it, the whole coronavirus situation obviously ground economic activity to a halt, virtually all in our country. We know about the 23 million Americans who filed in the last month for jobless benefits. It's probably going to jump another 5 million this week. We know what's happening across the world. In Europe, where they've stopped, they're in a depression. A lot of the countries there are in a world of hurt. Ditto in much of Asia, trying to claw out of this right now. Easier said than done. Japan on, countrywide lockdown. So it's not surprising we would see something like this. What concerns me going forward is obviously the attention should be front and center on getting a handle on this virus, having it under control, as Dr. Fauci has said, and worrying about the economic stuff after that. But you got to worry about the economic stuff in the middle of all of that, because it's having a measurable impact as we speak, right?
It really is. And the concern is it's going to change the way we live for a long period of time, that this isn't going to end quickly. And that's the biggest concern. I mean, the human toll obviously is first and foremost. You have to take care of that. Having said that, the economic toll, of course, is a very important part of human well-being as well. People, of course, if they get desperate, they're not making any money. That could have a negative toll on their health as well. So you have to balance that. But the one thing that I will say, I do feel very good of some of the people that we have in the White House right now that are business people that understand this. And I do think what the Federal Reserve has done to flood the market with money, to make sure that the credit markets are up and running, to help out these small businesses, I think they're doing all the right things to make sure we come back bigger and stronger than we did before. I mean, this was nobody's fault. These businesses that are being put out of business, the people that are getting laid off, they had nothing to do with this. This was one of these acts of God, if you will. And I do think what the government is doing to take these extraordinary steps will bring us back. And I'm optimistic, when we come back, we will come back a lot stronger than we ever have before. We're going to be more unified. But, the next couple months, it's going to be a tough toll. And I guess if you look at the oil curve down the road, at least the oil prices are somewhat optimistic. Things are going to get better. I am too. But, the next 24 hours could get ugly. And, we could see that oil maybe even go negative. So let's hope that doesn't happen, but it could.
You know, they also, we know from the market history, whether you're looking at stocks or even when you look at bonds, that they can overshoot and maybe oversell in this particular case. And to your point, Phil, you know, some of the forward contracts, whether you're talking in June and into the fall, where they're measurably higher here, I mean, put another digit in those prices, they're at 20 something, but again, way down from where we were. I'm also intrigued, Phil, of looking at the Dow. I don't have handy in front of me that if you were to take ExxonMobil and Chevron out of the picture, those losses probably wouldn't be nearly as bad, but they are part of that picture. And I'm wondering how that is going to skew the data for the stock market, not only today, but if this continues to be a concern for a while. What do you think?
Well, you know, I think the market is realizing that you know, we're going to see some terrible earnings. We're going to be going through that, but I think the market, like I am, is a little bit optimistic that a lot of these sectors are going to be okay. There's going to be parts of the economy, you know, for example, the technology sector that's still going to thrive during this environment. And in a capitalist society, when one area of the system goes down, sometimes it's an opportunity for other businesses. So I think that the market's optimistic that with all the stimulus in the economy, we can weather the blow, and it's going to create maybe even more innovation going forward, more new businesses. So I do think that what we're seeing in the stock market is that they think we're going to get through this. For ExxonMobil and Chevron, the big oil companies, in the past, when they've gone through this, the big ones usually get bigger. It's the small independent wildcatters that may be the losers on this, Neil. We may lose some of those small independent, which is a shame, because really when you look at the innovation in the U.S. energy industry, the shale revolution, it wasn't the ExxonMobils and the Chevrons that really created the strategies. You know, it was some of these young independent guys that used that capitalism drive to create this revolution. So it's a shame to see some of those small guys are going to get squeezed out, but that's the way it happens in the oil market. When it's a boom and bust market, you know, sometimes only the big survive.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened in 82 and 83, right? I mean, a lot of the wildcatters in Texas and elsewhere, they were driven out, but if anything, the big guys got even bigger, and that was the catalyst later on for Exxon and even Mobil coming together, now known as ExxonMobil. So history could be repeating itself here, but any final thoughts on where we go from here?
You know, I think the next 24 hours are going to be ugly. I think that the way the market's acting right now, we could get very close to zero on this. I don't think we're going to turn negative, but if we do take a picture of it, we'll probably never see it again. I think we're in the process of bottoming. It may be ugly. It's not going to be pretty, but I think we're getting close to the low. So I guess it's easy to say when you get near to zero, right?
All right, my friend, thank you very, very much. I hit with you a lot, but you knocked each one out of the park. Phil Flynn, who early on was talking about the coronavirus when we got the first hints of